Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. My name is Rebecca Schaefer, and I will serve as your worship leader today. I am grateful to share this service with you this morning, both in person and online. I'm still getting used to our hybrid world 3 years later, I don't know. Our church is a place where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. We are a community committed to social justice and to supporting various spiritual and ethical paths for our members and friends. Our congregation was founded in 1830, and we've worshiped in this building since 1889, but we acknowledge that we occupy land that's the ancestral home of the Adena, Hopewell, Miamia, and Shawnee peoples. If you'd like to know more about our church or about the Unitarian Universalist faith, please contact us by emailing member-care@firstuu.com. For those watching at home, this email address is in the description of today's service on our YouTube page. Our congregation strives to be welcoming to all, so you'll see signs for various accommodations posted around the church and listed in the order of service. Please ask our ushers if you have any questions. Regarding today's beautiful flowers, Mary Mark and David Johnson say, we offer our garden flowers to welcome Dr. Alex Riegel and his dog, which is awesome. We do feel like we've been waiting for Godot. I'm a construction worker, so that joke went over my head, but clearly you guys got it. So, before greeting our neighbors, before we bring our service today, please rise and greet your neighbor or say hi for a chat. Keep it snappy, and I will ring the singing bowl to bring us back together. First, though, we have to wave to the people watching from home. All right. All right, please return to your seats. One of the things that I love about our congregation is that it's an intergenerational space. So in our modern world, there's not a ton of places where you can go and experience many generations doing one thing together. Part of being an intergenerational space, I think, is being flexible to the realities that we all face in our growing world. So my son was supposed to light the chalice this morning, but he's being exceptionally free. But the good news is we are part of a community, which means Lincoln's family can help us out. They're going to light the chalice, and I will share with you A Flame to Light Our Path by Deborah Burnell. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consume our regrets for the past, our fears about the future, and our worries about today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace. Go for it.
Well, good morning, everybody. So thank you for that special welcome to Godot, who's probably watching this morning from Grayling, Michigan. I'm going to introduce the hymn this morning. We're going to do something a little different this morning. Both of our hymns are going to be sung either as call and response for the first one or in a round as the last one. And I'm introducing a song to you this morning, which you probably don't know, but you may know part of it if you've ever watched Phantom of the Opera. We call this All I Ask of You is Forever to Remember Me as Loving You. Okay, so that's the chorus of a song from Phantom to the Opera, right? Is that how it goes? Not exactly. Wasn't that song originally written for Phantom of the Opera? Or did they adopt it? Oh, okay. The origin might go back further, see? So anyway, it's a great song. And so one line is, all I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you. And I think the words are going to show up on the screen there in a minute. And then there's an Arabic version, Ishq Allah, which means God is love. Ishq is Arabic for love. Allah is Arabic for God. Ma'bud lillah, which means God is the beloved. And so in Sufi circles, they add Ishq Allah ma'bud lillah to the song, and it's done as call and response. And so the choir is going to help us learn this song. They're going to sing it 2 times maybe. And then we're going to sing it in unison probably 3 times. And then we're going to take a pause, and we're going to divide the congregation in half, and you're going to face each other, and we're going to do call and response 3 times. And I'll explain that when we get there. So. You have that. So what I like to do with this song is I like us to sing it to one another, because who are we asking to remember us loving them but one another? So our young folks are going to help us out if they're willing and able. So Meredith?
So if you were listening, Reverend Alex said that we were going to sing to each other. And so I'm wondering if our families here, our kids, might want to split so that there's some right here and some on the other side. And if you're not sure of the words, you can listen with your ears to hear what everyone else is singing, or if you can read, you can look up on the screen. Then you can, if you can't understand it, you can just listen. Just listen. That'll be enough.
So we could use some more folks on this side to sort of round out our voices.
All right.
So,
you can stay here.
If those of you in the seats would turn and face each other and sing this song to one another, let's sing it through 3 times. But this time, how it will go, this side can begin with all I ask of you, okay? Then they'll sing the line 1 time, and then you'll sing the line back 1 time, and then you do Ishq Allah Ma'bud Lillah 1 time, and you sing it back 1 time. And that's one round of it. We'll do that 3 times. Okay? Hey, that was pretty darn good, especially given that my cues messed you up a couple of times. But so I hope you enjoy that song. Give me some feedback about it, because I would like us to learn that song and have it become part of our repertoire. So thank you this morning for that effort.
All right, it's now the time of our service for joys and concerns. Part of being a beloved community is sharing joys and concerns with each other. If you'd like to share anything using the various methods listed on the back of your order of service, please fill out the form and place it in the offering basket when it's passed, or on the desk at the back of the service when you leave the service. In the interest of time, we're not going to do everybody coming forward this morning, but please relax and contemplate the joys and concerns that we've experienced since we last gathered together while I do one for everybody. So, these stones represent our joys and concerns, and the water represents the love of community. All of our individual joys and concerns come together in one bowl of water to be symbolically shared and borne by us as a community. The first stone is for the joys that we share. The next stone represents the private joys and concerns that we have closely guarded in our hearts. The third stone is for the sorrows of the wider world. And the final stone is for the hope that we can be agents of healing in a broken world. I think it's now time for our kids, including mine, to go to their classes. Thanks, guys. And thanks for helping with the round today, guys. You did a great job. Our August Share the Plate is for our church's work at South Avondale Elementary. We'll learn more about this program in just a minute. This is the last Sunday of the month, so please don't forget to donate to the Share the Plate to support this major part of our church's social justice program. If you're inspired to donate to South Avondale or support the work of First Church, there are several methods of giving. These are listed in the order of service, and there are links in the description of today's service for our YouTube channel, people watching online. Just click on More at the end of the sermon description. If you're visiting with us on the first time, please let the plate pass you by. We're just glad that you're here. Today, we're fortunate to have with us Miss Loretta Robinson, the reading specialist at South Avondale. She will share with us the important work of educating our neighbors at the school and explain how we can help. Come on up. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start off with a round of applause to thank you guys for all the hard work you do for South Avondale. Thank you so much. Currently, South Avondale, as far as our school report card shows that we are progressing. We earned 5 stars this year in progressing, and that's the highest that you can receive. So because of the hard work and the collaboration with First Unitarian, we were able to receive 5 stars. Yes. And then also in gap closing, we received 4 stars, 4 out of 5 stars for closing that gap in early literacy. So that is another round of applause. But as we know, in the inner city, many of our students begin school 1 to 2 years behind. And because of the program with First Unitarian, they have just came in with their systematic approach. They come in not only just as tutors, they build rapport and love with these kids. These kids are so excited to see their buddy each week. Just having that person that they know each week is going to show up for me and help me along with my learning journey. I mean, it's been so rewarding for our school. As far as our achievement, that's the area that we struggle in because there are so many gaps. Our achievement score right now is at a 1 star. We had the progress, we're closing the gaps, but because of the gaps are being so large, that this is why we need anybody, please, to come and help. So last year was our first year that those students were the first students who weren't impacted by COVID, because this was the first school year that we had a traditional school year where we had the whole school year. And we have some amazing results to share. So starting out last year, our on-track students, we started out the school year with 30% students on track in kindergarten. So as you guys know, 30% is a low number. But with all of our hard work and our collaboration, we were able to move that 30% to 92.5%. Yeah. So 92.5 of our students left kindergarten on track to go to the 1st grade. So it did that amazing work, but it could not be done. The teachers can't do it all. The teacher assistants, we need our village. We need our village. We need our teachers, our parents, our community members, and that's why we're here. We need you. We need you so much. And it changed so that was an increase of 62.5%. So from 30 to 92%, and that 62.5% is amazing. And that is what gave us that gap closing score of 4 stars. So next year, we're looking to get that 5 stars, but to get that 5 stars, we need you. We know that monetary donations, they do help, but a volunteer is priceless. Then one enkindled spirit can set hundreds on fire. So if just one person can just help us out to get our goal of getting 5 stars, we would really, really appreciate it. So today, after service, they have a booth outside. If you have any more questions, I can stay after. But if you have a love for children and you want to help in this work that we're doing, they offer really good training. Every volunteer is trained through their program. So don't feel like you won't have any assistance on this road and this journey. But we want to work with you if you want to work with us. So please, please, please sign up today. Thank you.
So I don't know how many of you woke up to the news this morning. All right, there it is. That there were several shootings again in America over the weekend. There are shootings in America every weekend. Most of them don't make the news. Most of them fall in the category of, yeah, we expect that to happen. But the shootings this weekend stood out a little bit because, once again, they were racially motivated, at least the shooting that took place in Jacksonville. And so I thought this morning as I read that news, how many times in my 30 years of ministry I have stood before a congregation on a Sunday morning and mentioned that Saturday or Friday or at some point during the previous week, there was another shooting, and often a mass shooting. And at some point, you kind of run out of anything new to say about such atrocity. Now, we often rail against our politicians for the ubiquity of guns in our culture, and that's true. It is a political problem. But as I thought this morning, the connection between the sermon series I'm doing and gun culture came to me. And the reason we rail against our politicians so much about the availability of guns in our culture is because we are a people who use guns. Why are we a people who use guns? Yes, availability is one thing, but the will to purchase and use a gun for violence is something entirely different. And maybe the solution to the problem isn't the continual railing against politicians. Maybe the solution to the problem is the transformation of the type of people we are. And if we had a culture of people who were more centered on love and compassion and kindness and charity, perhaps we wouldn't have this level of a gun problem in our culture. And so what I'm doing in the sermon series this last few Sundays, and today's where the egoic rubber hits the spiritual road for this sermon series, is I'm talking about love as the power to transform who we are and how we show up in the world. So I think we might want to think a little bit about the possibility that even though we don't have, as individuals, the political power to change the availability of guns in this culture through political action, we have the power to show up as a unique kind of presence in the world that can affect other people. And if enough of us do this, if a critical mass of us do this, if we come from that place of love and compassion and understanding and patience and forgiveness, maybe fewer and fewer people would feel motivated to take such violent action in support of their ideals or as expressions of their anger. So that's the spontaneous part of this morning based on the news. But I do want to take a moment of silence and in your hearts, in your minds, enter a moment of prayer, enter a moment of silence, whatever you're comfortable with, as we contemplate, these horrific acts over the weekend. And let us also remember and especially contemplate those who died through the motivation of racial hatred. So I like to wander when I talk. Maybe turn it down just a bit. And I'm still getting used to my new grazing land. Like how far I can wander before I hit the electric fence. One day I'm going to bolt the electric fence and come out and get really close to you all, and the folks operating the Zoom camera are just going to have to figure that out. So this is the third sermon in a three-part sermon series that I wanted to share with you upon my arrival, because it gets to the crux of who I am as a spiritual person, as a spiritual teacher, as a spiritual director. I do spiritual direction with people from time to time, to give you a sense of where I'm coming from in my own spiritual life as I minister to you as a congregation. And I know that I've thrown some pretty heavy mental stuff at you recently in the form of evolutionary psychology, which is what the insert is today. I bet you didn't expect to see the insert on evolutionary psychology this morning, right? You thought you were coming to church. This is graduate school, folks. So, no, the reason I wanted to provide it for you is because I know that evolutionary psychology is not terribly current in the popular culture at large. Although in academia, it's been current for a number of decades now, and most academicians, at least in the field of the sciences, have pretty much come to terms with the incredible, powerful, explanatory ability of evolutionary psych. But it takes these things time to bleed from the ivory tower into the popular mindset, and I kind of see myself as one of the tributaries trying to help that happen. Because as I learned about evolutionary psychology myself, combined with my own spiritual study and practice over the course of a number of decades now, I realized that evolutionary psychology is a much better explanatory tool when I try to teach people about the ego or the structure of the self, which you have to deal with when you're on the spiritual path. So that's why I'm sharing it with you, in the hopes that over time you will learn a little bit about evolutionary psychology and begin to see that it's an incredibly powerful and I think accurate explanatory tool about what it means to be a human being and what drives us and how we tend to show up in the world. And so I provided the insert because some of you might be very motivated to learn more about it, and some of you might be saying to yourselves, all right, I'm glad the sermon series is over, and next week we won't have to listen to evolutionary psychology. But if you are interested in it and you want to explore more, you're going to get an email through the church email system in the next few days inviting you to a Zoom session with me to do a sermon discussion about these three sermons. A little evolutionary psych heavy, but really it's about love, which is where we're going today. Okay. The other reason I think evolutionary psych is important is because I can guarantee you, and if you stick with me long enough, you'll see why I can guarantee you, that if you understand the basics of evolutionary psychology, it will give you a much better understanding of everything from spiritual figures like Jesus and the Buddha to why we struggle so much with race as human beings. Evolutionary psychology can greatly enhance our understanding of everything on that continuum. And so, hopefully you'll show up for the Zoom session. I'm available for coffee, as many people are learning. The Coffee Emporium has already become my secondary office, so I'm happy to have coffee with you and talk until you are blue in the face about these matters. So, all right, let's get on with the sermon. That was another spontaneous preamble, really. But the sermon today is the crux of where I was trying to go in this sermon series. But to get there, there are always people who haven't come to the first parts of a sermon series, and I do want to do a little review. But I'm not going to do the whole sermon on evolutionary psychology. But for those of you who may not have gotten it yet, or for those of you who are new today and have no clue what I'm talking about in this moment, let me do a little bit of a review. So my first Sunday was August 6th. That was 3 weeks ago, I think. And I did a sermon called Have You? And in the sermon, I introduced this notion of evolutionary psychology. And the reason I introduced it is because it sort of explains why I tend to use the term scoundrel. And you'll remember in that sermon I had my scoundrel notebook out, and I took notes of the scoundrels in the congregation as I began that sermon. And it turned out that by the time I was done, everybody made it into the notebook, including me. So I use that sort of as a jest to introduce you to the notion of scoundrel. And all I mean by scoundrel is that the human experience is difficult enough. And when we enter the human experience, there are all sorts of forces that shape who we become as human beings by the time we become adults. And one of the great forces is genetics, biology. And evolutionary psychology is rooted in that. And so I use that as the jumping off place to say, look, we're born into this life. We don't feel we have any say in the matter, but here we are, suddenly human beings in the world. And we have this biological structure that drives us, and we also have this family that takes care of us, and we have these peer groups that influence us. And, that takes place for a couple of decades. And somewhere in our 20s, we become, quote-unquote, adults. And we wake up one day and we go, this is what it means to be an Alex in the world. But that usually happens somewhere around our mid-20s. And by the time I become that Alex, all those conditioning forces that take place to make me that Alex have already happened. And I didn't have the self-empowerment to influence that. I was a passive receiver of all those forces, and they made me who I am. But at some point when we become adults, we go, this is what it means to be an Alex. So I became an Alex before I had any power over becoming an Alex. So I got conditioned without any say in the matter. And you got conditioned without any say in the matter. And you got conditioned without any say in the matter. And as a result of that conditioning, we try to be the best human beings we can be, but we never always get it right. We never always get it right. So that's my way of saying, in a lighthearted way, there's some part of us that's always a scoundrel. We don't always love as well as we'd like to love, do we? We're not always as generous as we'd like to be. We're not always as patient as we would like to be. And so when I say we're all scoundrels, it's just because the way we're conditioned as human beings, there are limitations to who and what we are and how we show up in the world. And we can't always be our best selves because of these limitations. So we are scoundrels. It's a term of endearment. So if I come up to you and I say, how you doing this morning, scoundrel? That's my lighthearted way of saying, I love you for who you are. Yep. All right. So here's the good news about that. Because we become conditioned before we even realize we have autonomy and the power to take control over our lives, we're not to blame for being the scoundrels we are. Right? We are not to blame for being the scoundrels we are. And the person sitting to your right, if you have somebody sitting to your right, is not to blame for being the scoundrel that person is. And the person to your left is not to blame for being the scoundrel that person is. Now, I'd like you to sit with this for a second. Let it be more than just a mental absorption of an idea I put in your head. You are not to blame for being you. And no one else is to blame for being who they are. So, to me, the awareness of our scoundrelness and how we're not to blame reminds me to go easier on myself. Have you been going easier on yourself the last few weeks? I hope so. Take it easy on your scoundrelness. It's not your fault. And it reminds me to go easy on others. Have you been going easier on others the last few weeks? Take it easy on them. It's not their fault. So that was basically the gist of the first sermon, and I ended that by saying, however, once you know you're a scoundrel and it's not your fault, once you know this, you are from that moment forward responsible for the scoundrel you continue to be and become. In other words, once you realize your scoundrelness, you have to take some responsibility for who you are and how you show up in the world from that moment forward. And that's, to me, the point of the religious/spiritual life. The religious/spiritual life isn't like a set of ideas that I affirm hopefully gets me into heaven because I have the right answers when I meet Peter at the pearly gate, or I believe the right things before I met Peter at the pearly gate. The point of the religious and spiritual life, and this is lost in today's modern world, is that it is an incredibly powerful path to the transformation of being. From the transformation of the scoundrel I realize myself to be the day I wake up as that scoundrel, to becoming a better person throughout the rest of the course of my days. That's a different kind of religiosity and spirituality than you often hear taught in today's world. But these traditions, if you delve into the deep contemplative aspects of these traditions, have wonderful teachings and methodologies to help you become a better scoundrel. I love it. Is Ramona, did you make it here today? Sensational scoundrel. So last week, okay, so I'm off script. I'm on a roll today. I tend to do this. So I'm getting on a roll. I'll control it. Last week, I had coffee with Mary Tarbell Green, who did last Sunday's sermon. And she said, I got up and I greeted everybody and I said, "Good morning, my beloved scoundrels." And I thought, she stole my thunder. Because I was going to say that this morning and see what your response was. But I watched her and she did it well. And most of you laughed, it sounded like. But then at the board retreat yesterday, Ramona used the phrase, which I'd never heard or used before, sensational scoundrel. So now I get to say, "Good morning, my sensational scoundrels." Because that's where we're headed. From the scoundrel we are, the moment we realize it, to being sensational scoundrels. That's the path. So I gave you a mnemonic device to remember the gist of that sermon. Does anybody remember how I said, here's how you can remember all this? Really? I thought 95% of people would remember everything I said 3 weeks ago. I said, "You scoundrels." No, don't feel bad, because people come up to me 2 days after I preach and said, in your sermon on Sunday, you said da-da-da-da-da, and I went, I don't remember that. Because I go off script like this. So anyway, I said, here's the way to remember the whole point of this whole sermon, my first sermon. Have you yet become the person you want to be before you die? And again, let that sink in. Don't just let it be an idea. Be honest with yourself. Have you yet become the person you want to be before you die? Are you as loving as you'd like to be? Are you as patient as you'd like to be? Are you as kind? Are you as forgiving? Are you as charitable? That's our work. Let's hasten that process. Okay? So, there in 5 or 7 minutes is the synopsis of the first sermon. Second sermon, I can do a synopsis quicker. Because, it's okay to say, hey, we're all scoundrels and we need to be better. Second sermon is, well, how in the world do you get there? I didn't tell you how to get there. I just said become better scoundrels, right? So you need some help. I need some help. And to make a second sermon shorter than the first summary, I basically said, look, the mind, which so many of us are so identified with the mind that we mistake our thoughts for who we are. And I said, the mind actually with which we're so identified is the weakest category of ourselves. You think of the mind, the emotions, and the body/instincts. The mind is very weak. It's very good in a very narrow range. It's very good at thinking and calculating and imagining and remembering. But relative to the power of the emotions and the instincts in the body, it's very weak. And one of the reasons people don't succeed when they make a commitment to change is because they rely too much on the mind. But the mind pales in comparison when we speak of power to the emotions Emotions are much more powerful than the mind. The emotions tell your mind how to perceive the world. If you feel good, you perceive an event one way. If you don't feel good, you can perceive the same event in a very different way. So the mind serves the emotions, right? A little self-observation makes this clear. And the emotions serve the instincts. Now, there's a very intimate relation between the emotions and the instincts. When we run out on automatic, our emotions are telling us whether we are succeeding at our instinctual efforts or failing. So if you're having a negative emotional experience, whatever that might be, sadness, anger, whatever the case may be, what your emotions are telling you is that there's a part of your instinctual life that is failing. It might be your attempts to find a mate. It might be your attempts to preserve yourself by accumulating food and shelter and clothing and the things you need. It might be your failure to participate meaningfully in the group. But any negative emotion you have, I guarantee you, you can trace to one or more of those instinctual failures. That's what our emotions are telling us. So there's a very intimate relationship with the emotions and the instincts. So here's the genius of the spiritual traditions. The spiritual traditions use the cultivation of positive emotions as a tool to turn back toward the instincts and affect the instincts. So rather than being a measure of our instinctual life, they actually become the tool by which we can manage our instinctual life, because it's a very intimate relationship. So I said in that sermon, here's the mechanism. Cultivate the strongest emotion you possess, which for all of us I believe is love. And intentionally use love as a way of showing up in the world to manage your instinctual life. So you may encounter a person and say you're trying to have a group experience, and in that group there's a really bad scoundrel. Not a scoundrel like the rest of us, but a really bad scoundrel. We all have our lists of bad scoundrels, right? And that person frustrates the daylights out of you. And you encounter that person and you have an instinctual response that's negative. So-and-so always does such and such whenever I say or do blah, blah, blah. And I don't like it and it frustrates me. And maybe I even say, they're out to get me. Or they're not smart enough to get me. Or whatever the case may be. We have these reactions because our instinctual life is struggling there. So the cultivation, the intentional cultivation of positive emotions goes like this. You have to conscientiously be aware and intentional about approaching that situation with positive emotionality. And I suggest love. So that when you encounter that person, you are no longer letting the instincts drive your response to that person. You are sitting back within yourself knowing that you are intentionally going to come from the place of love despite your instinctual response. That is how you can show up in a loving way with the scoundrel in your life. And I guarantee you, I've been doing this work for a long time now, most of my adult life. When I can remember to do that, it is a game changer. It changes the way I feel in my own skin. I'm a better scoundrel than I was when I was riding the instinctual wave. And it changes the experience of the other. Suddenly, the dynamic you were locked in with this person, somebody pulls the emergency brake and the response they expected from you doesn't come. Wait a minute, Alex is suddenly acting loving toward me. This isn't the response I'm usually able to provoke in him when I do da-da-da-da-da-da. It is a game changer, folks. It's a game changer. That's how love overcomes the instinctual life. That's the mechanism. Okay, sermon 2. All right, sermon 3, which is not going to be another 20 minutes. Sermon 3 is going to start here I've told some of you that I'm very much into the mystic poets. A lot of people read the mystic poets. They read their Rumi and their Hafez and their Rabia, and their Attar and whatnot. And they're beautiful poems. But most people don't really understand the psychological and theological depths going on in these poems. And I love to plumb those depths. And so I'm going to do that again with another poem. 2 weeks ago, I shared a poem from Rumi, Let Them Sleep. I'm going to share one with you this week by Hafez. Because the first week was Become a Better Scoundrel. The second week was You Do It Through Love. Today is, what does that look like? What does that look like? If you want to take this teaching seriously, what does it look like to be love? Okay. Very short poem by Hafez. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to this world all its beauty? How did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? I love roses. Ever since I was a kid, my favorite flower has been the red rose. And it remains my favorite flower, and it's actually a very powerful spiritual symbol in Sufism. So how did the rose ever open its heart and give to this world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, says Hafez, we all remain too frightened. Isn't that powerful? It's powerful. And so what I like about the poem is the intimate relationship between the light and the rose. So usually if I use this poem, sometimes I do mystic poet study circles and I'll throw out this poem. The vast majority of people identify with the rose because they want to blossom and give all their beauty to the world. But it's rare, I noticed, for someone to identify with the light. But I actually think in this poem, which most people see as being about the rose, I think Hafez is talking about the light. The light gives the encouragement to the rose to bloom. So when I talk about how to show up in this world, this is the question I'm asking. Are you the rose or are you the light? Are you the rose or are you the light? Both are good. Both are good. Human beings can blossom into these beautiful flowers. We have the ability for incredible expression of our being. That's the rose. And that's part of the journey. That's how you become the person you want to be before you die. But it requires the light. And to me, the light is where I want to go with this sermon. Think about being the light. Are you one always waiting for someone else to encourage you to become who you are? Or have you reached a point in your life, and most of us have, but we don't tend to behave this way. Have you reached a point in your life where you've developed enough that you can stop the constant obsession with what I need next to become more of who I want to be or think I want to be in this world to how can I become that which encourages others to become who they want to be in the world? How can I be the light that helps the rose to bloom? So when you encounter somebody, you can use this metaphor. I'm encountering a person here, and I can either be the rose or I can be the light. I can either be looking for something that I need from them to get what I feel I need to become whatever I want to become, or I can flip the script and see what can I do for this person to help edify this person, to help this person blossom, to help this person become the person they want to be before they die. So the whole point of this sermon, which was a slow roll to love, was to this point. I've given you a path of how to show up as a loving presence in people's lives. I've given you some science, and I've given you some psychology, and I've given you some spirituality, and now I'm giving you a model. And I think the takeaway is, if we truly want to be more loving people in the world, if that's part of what we want to be before we die, every person we encounter is an opportunity to practice being that person, to practice being the light that helps them bloom, to practice being love. That's a simple message, isn't it? It's harder to do that than it is to understand evolutionary psychology. Okay, so I've actually upped the game today on you, because putting ideas into practice is much harder than absorbing ideas. But I'd like you to consider practicing how to show up as love with every person you encounter. That's the only way you will learn to become the person you want to be before you die. And I think we owe it to each other, at the very least, in this hour and 15-minute oasis on Sunday morning. We owe it to each other in this oasis that is first you, a rare hour-long experience in the course of our weeks, to do this with and for one another. And the real test is, will you forget that before the potluck? All right, so 2 more minutes. A little bit of a Hafez poem to throw at you again. I love this one. Why not become the one who lives with a full moon in each eye, that is saying with that sweet moon language what every other person in the world is dying to hear? And then there's a jest to this. He says, we're dying to hear, I love you. Or do you love me? And the jest in the sermon is, well, if you actually do that, someone will call the cops. But that's the gist of it. Why not be that person who says what others need to hear? So I ended last week with a saying, and I'm going to end this week with a saying. Same thing, but maybe this week you'll hear it differently. We take the next step. That's a fierce demand. We take the next step in love. We take the next action in love. It's fierce demand. We speak the next word in love. We speak the next word in love. We think the next thought. When it gets to thoughts, it's tough. We think the next thought in love. And we breathe the next breath in love. I used to end my sermons with a saying that I had let fall by the wayside until I heard my son do his first sermon, and at the end of the sermon, he quoted me. And I thought, I got to get back to using that. And so I used to say, let us go our way this hour, this day, this week, remembering to make beauty for one another and letting love have jurisdiction. All right. Our last hymn is number 396. We're going to sing this in a round. If If you would turn to it. And you'll notice, actually, do you have hymnals? You're looking at the screen. You'll notice when it comes up on the screen, there will be, I believe, an asterisk at the place where the people who come in second come in. So the choir is going to help us out, and we're just going to do it for a while, and we have a way to decide when we've done enough, and you'll hear Jera begin to shift and end the song. But you'll see here, I know this rose will open. Whoever goes first, whichever side goes first, let's have this side go first. You sing the whole thing through, but we want to be really clear where the asterisk says will, this side can come in, but don't come in with the word will. You come in with the beginning of the song, so you sing the whole thing too. And we're going to do this, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 20 times. We'll see how it feels. So if you'd like to stand up, please, if you would, and let's begin with this side. Yep. All right, 1 and 2. All right. And amen. All right.
Today's closing words are from Anne Lamont. To love yourself as you are is a miracle. To seek yourself as you found yourself for now, and now is all we have, and love is who we are. Will you please join me? All right, 1 second. My son did get to extinguish the challenge, so if you guys will give him a second. All right, you ready, Elliot? Please join me in reading together the words that will appear on the screen as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment that we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you.